So welcome everyone to Chess in 21st Century. So this is the lecture I prepared last week, but the Grandmaster happened, so I'm going to be giving this lecture today. So I wanted to cover the games of a young player from India. His name is, I think, pronounced Praggnanandhaa. So he just became the youngest IM at the age of 10 years and 10 months. Of course, on track to become a very strong player. So I wanted to go over a couple of these games. He got his IM norms recently, so I'm going to look at a couple of his recent games. So he's playing black. So this he played in the Aeroflot Open. Is there anyone familiar with this tournament? Aeroflot. Aeroflot. So Aeroflot is actually a Russian airline, and they have this very strong open in Russia. And to play in the A group, I think you have to be over 2,500 or 2,550 FIDE. So it's it's a very strong tournament. So they have Group A, Group B, Group C. I believe Group C is under 2,300. Group B is 23 to 2,500. So very strong tournament. I think they didn't have it for a couple of years, but now it's back. So to play in that tournament is great challenge, great opportunity. So he's playing black, so knight f3, knight c6. So the two knights opening, of course, a lot of ways for white to play. Knight g5 is an option, d3 is an option. So d4. And what should black do now? So someone taught you d5, but they didn't teach you why you need to play d5. It's much more important to understand your opening than memorize your lines, because if you end up in a position that you don't know, and you don't remember, then how are you going to figure out a move? So you need to understand why you're doing the things you're doing. So first of all, the knight doesn't have too many good squares to go to. And second of all, white is going to have a strong center if you don't do anything in the center. So your opponent's playing in the center, so you have to strike in the center. So we're playing d5 for two reasons. So it's a tempo move, and we're creating a space for a square for our knight. So the scary thing, at least what looks scary, is take, take, take. And now our king is stuck in the center. And the king side is compromised. But fortunately for us, we haven't committed to castling. So we still have the opportunity to castle queen side. And we have this very strong center. And we're up a pawn, yeah. I had to count. So if castle, bishop e6, queen out, and I'm going to castle this side, and I'm fine. And of course, our king is not in trouble because our opponent is not really ahead in development, and we were able to close the e-file. So you're playing d5 to make safe square for your knights, because if you play something like this, and I go bishop d5 again, your knight has to move around. So d5, so bishop has to go to b5, pinning, bishop takes. So the reason that the bishop takes is because if you take, with the knight, you're losing another tempo. And then bishop's going to get out. So you're trying to play against this compromised pawn structure. And also this knight can be kicked away, and in some instances doesn't have a very good place to go. So let's make a couple more moves. So rook b8 is not the most common move. Bishop e7 is more common. So white's idea is to play something like, okay. Oops. So why did we go f3, f4 instead of f4 right away? If I go f4 right away, whose turn is it? Whose turn is it? Black's. Not a trick question. Okay, so bishop e7. But if we do something like this, now it's white to move, so I actually gain the tempo. Okay, so he played rook b8. So rook b8, the idea is to make development of this bishop a little difficult, but at the same time, black is not quick enough to develop his king side and castle. So knight b3, bishop e3, attacking the pawn. So where white lost a tempo, now he's going to gain a tempo back. He moved his knight away from the center, but now he's gaining the tempo, tempo back by attacking this pawn. So a6, knight d2, and f6. So what do we think about a move like this? Right. Yeah, so it's very understandable why black wants to do something like this. Because if, let's say, black castles, so black has to do something in the center, because computer doesn't want me to play f4. So I'm just making random moves for black just to show. If this pawn comes all the way to f6, this king has some problems. So black has to react to this f-pawn push somehow. But he played f6 in this position. So obviously trying to open up his bishops, open up his position. But what can possibly be wrong with playing f6 so early?
King safety.
Right. King is in the center, and black voluntarily is opening the center. And we know the general rule is if your king is in the center, you try to keep the center closed until you're castled and your king is away. So you don't play where your king is. Your opponent plays where your king is. So how can we possibly take advantage of this king? So we have to take to open up the... Well, he didn't take, but... So if you play something rook e1, I'm just going to castle away. So how to make rook e1 a tempo move? If I was open, so a lot of things. So what are the good pieces for both colors and bad pieces? So what pieces does white want off the board? Exactly. So yeah, if we have the same position, if I take out these two pieces, besides the fact that the king is going to be much weaker, these dark squares will be very weak. So if I can put a knight on c5, as I mentioned, good knight versus a bad bishop, black's position is going to be very tough, and this bishop is going to be and this bishop is already bad because of these pawns. So the bishop wants to get out to f5 and find some activity, and both of these pawns are very weak. So bishop c5 is possible. Of course, black is not going to make a move like this and resign. So black is just simply going to play king here and do artificial castling. And then rook out. So it's going to take a few more moves, but black is surviving here. So I like this bishop a7 move a lot because it's a tempo move. So rook has to go somewhere. Let's say b7. So now we're going to check. King f7. Same artificial castling. And now how do we get a grip on the dark squares? Yeah, bishop d4. So we're defending this pawn. Knight c5 is going to be a tempo move. So even, well, this is, so here queen f5, queen f6 is not possible, actually even, and you're losing material. But this position is already very bad for the same reason. So in addition, we also have this king safety problem, but let's say you're surviving with your king. I put a knight here, complete domination of the dark squares, and this bishop is just terrible. Weakness, weakness, bad piece. And the knight is on a dark square, so this bishop can never capture it. So this knight is just going to be here. So instead, he played bishop d4, take, take, queen c3, defending, and now c7. But let's do an overall. So black kind of got away with his bad play, so he could have been in a much worse position. So now the question is, how important is this pawn, and what's black's idea, and where does black want his pieces to be? So someone mentioned another move, so let's see. So why do you want to play rook on b4?
Rook b4 is play rook d4.
Right, so here black is playing for initiative. So because if black plays something passive like rook b7, knight a5, then rook goes to a7, it's a very, your pieces are very passive, and you're not really using your two bishop advantage. So for your two bishops to be strong, you need to push c5, d4, c4 for this bishop to come into your game. So rook b4 is a very good move because you're threatening rook g4 and you're getting out of this bishop c7 nasty threat. So white takes. Where to go? Queen c8. So bishop back. So why did we put the rook there? Rook g4. So queen goes to c3. So we gave up a pawn, so again, we're playing for initiative, so we have to play active. So we don't want we don't want white to get a grip on the dark squares. So how do we stop black from playing bishop d4 or knight c5? Yeah, c5 yourself. So where is black's compensation? So two bishops. What else? So active pieces, active rook. Yeah, rook on g4 is very nice. So this rook lift ideas are one of my favorite ideas in chess in general. So what else? Right, so the center is moving, so some kingside attack ideas. What about pieces? What is a bad piece for white? Yeah, so the knight on b3 is very bad. When the pawn was on c6, this knight was great because this knight wanted to go to c5 and control everything. Once we push here, this knight is actually quite bad. So the bishop on e5 is of course great. But this knight is terrible. So f3, so we go back. So queen a5. So here actually black has a nice tactic, but a little bit complicated. So what's the first move we have to look at here? So c4, inviting your opponent's piece into the game. Rook where?
Rook takes g2.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, rook g2. I don't think you're ready for your rook g2 yet because I don't think your pieces are really coming in. So you have bishop h3, but you don't have a follow-up. Yeah. So
I feel like the first move you should look at.
Okay. Fair enough. So yeah, so rook g2, so rook g2 doesn't work, so bishop h3 looks very natural to me. So we have to calculate what happens after bishop h3. So in the game he played bishop d8. So so after rook f2, black has a very nice tactic. So c4, knight d4, my knight is going to be great in the center. So you don't want to play c4 here unless you have a very specific reason, because c5 pawn is keeping my knight away.
Rook takes f3.
Rook takes f3.
Rook takes f2.
g2. So I cannot go here, I have to go here. Queen g4. Do you have mate? Yes. Oh, sorry. So we want to play queen g4 instead. So you're threatening my rook and you're threatening rook h2. Yeah. Can I stop this? Rook g3 you're just gonna take. Rook g3, I'm gonna take rook g3. And then queen f3 is coming. Okay, so let's see, do we have a way of stopping this? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, so white can defend with bishop g3 here, I suppose. So bishop g3, why didn't I consider this move when analyzing? this looks good. So he played a sneaky move. He played bishop d8. So of course he cannot take. So queen goes back. So what to do now? But also, so you want to go here, here. So bishop b5. I don't know, I'm starting to like this position. So here, here. Can take either way, maybe something like this. And so your attack has...
I wonder about c4 instead of taking the d-pawn. I wonder if the d-pawn's a target now. No, just instead of c takes d4, I can recapture that.
Oh, I see. Okay, so d4, c3, bishop b5. So you want to play here?
Yeah, nice.
Oh, I think that's a nice square. Yeah, so I mean, one of your advantages that black has is this initiative and this two-pair bishop. I mean, maybe I can even play rook e1 and not give you all that. But the question is, do we want the bishop on e6 or c6? So he doesn't want to commit with his pawns yet. Because the pawns here are nice, so we definitely don't want to play c4. So which way is better to go? So I mean, there's an immediate problem with this, but at the same time, if you put a bishop on e6, you're also still keeping in mind this ideas of bishop h3. Because on c6, this diagonal is closed, but from e6, you have choices. So king h1, so d4, bishop d5. So here he played a move, but there's a better continuation. So what to do?
Well, queen f4, threatening the bishop.
So that's what he played, but there's a better continuation, actually. What's black's worst piece? Bishop on d8. So now that the pawn structure has changed, where can this bishop go? Right. Because we have this pawn chain, so bishop on g5, now just simply threatening to put a bishop on e3. And it's going to become very hard for white to find moves. And then I can come after this bishop. So of course playing a move like f4 is just terrifying, because probably can't even sacrifice and take everything. So he played queen f5. Bishop went back. Now he plays here. Bishop e3. So switching over to the h file. And now knight c5. So now black to move. Let's go back. So what is the threat? What is black's big threat? Right, and this happens because this queen is overworked, protecting everything, and we know that one piece just can't do anything. So just to make a random move, we want to take, and win a piece. So the piece ran away. Oops. So knight takes. So black to move. So now literally every single one of your pieces is aiming at the king. So now this is a very good time to look for tactics.
d5 to f3.
Right, so the king is in a checkmate, so if we can check on the diagonal, it's going to be mate. So rook, so we don't want to give up our bishop because that's the piece that's going to be checkmating. So rook takes. So how do we take?
With the queen.
With the queen. Yeah, because we don't care about the queen if we're checkmating, and if you take with the bishop, If you take with the bishop, you actually don't have a threat. You're not really threatening anything. So with the queen, we're threatening mate. So what is white's only move?
Queen at F1.
And now, so if rook takes g3, what's your move after g takes f3? So let's say this is your game. How are you going to take on g3? Or are you going to take on g3? Queen g3. So why queen? Right, queen takes g3 actually gives your opponent the least amount of options. And it's less work, so it's very encouraging to make moves like this. So of course you still have the g2 threat, so this is mate. And white just simply doesn't have any moves. Okay, rook takes g3 is possible, but so if I take with the queen, you'll take with the rook. But I have this, and
you still take with the
if you take with the rook, I'm gonna play here. And then yeah, but game continues. So queen g3, very nice tactic. So I thought he played this game really well. I really like this rook b4 move. It's a very nice move, sacrificing, and then I like how he continued to just because here when he gives up the pawn, it's a long-term compensation, so he doesn't have to do something crazy to prove that he gave up a pawn for a reason. So long-term, his pieces are good. This knight is out of the game. He's building up an attack, so he has the time to do something. So white's pieces are kind of scattered. So this bishop on e5 is nice, but it's alone. There's no pieces supporting it, and it's aiming. It's aiming here, but this square is defended, and this queen is out of the game. This knight is just completely useless. So at some point in the game, white should have tried to play c3 and break apart this pawn chain, but he played too slowly, and black simply just improved all his pieces without, like, he didn't do anything fancy until the very last part of the game. Like, everything here was just simply improving pieces and putting every piece on its ideal square. Okay, so we have one more game from him. I believe this one. So here he's white. Say 45. So d3. Does anyone play this for white or black? For white or black? Both? Oh, really? Okay. So which move do you like facing the list with black? D4?
Yeah.
Oh. But now you know how you can just win the game. But in that game, I have to say he played the opening very carelessly, so he could have just been in trouble out of the opening. So like he played like a 10-year-old basically. You know, it's like pushing pawns and not castling. So you don't mind knight g5? No, so I'm asking, you don't mind facing it? No. Okay, fair enough. Actually, yeah, when I play this, I usually play d3 because I like these positions. So bishop c5, transposing. So now transpose to an Italian game. Bishop c2. So I used to play this position a lot with white, and my coach convinced me to start playing Roy Lopez. And the reason I like playing this opening is because white ID is so like straightforward, and so you just want to play knight f1, put a queen here, knight g3, knight h4, and just checkmate your opponent, and it's just, you know, it's like direct one-dimensional kind of chess. But now I have to play complicated openings. So takes. So usually here I would never take. I would always go queen e2. So takes. Here. So knight f1. I don't want to spend too much time on the opening. So queen back. Take. So how to take back? Okay. So this is not like right or wrong. It's like you take one way, you have a plus over minus. You take the other way. Its position is equal. They're both playable. So like, which one would you choose? Queen takes looks kind of unnatural to me. I think you either have to take with the knight or the pawn. Maybe you can't even take with the queen, attack the pawn. possible.
Yes, how it takes.
So how many want to take with the pawn? 2 people. So why do you want to take with the pawn? So like, what is the general rule when we have positions like this? Like, how do we decide? Let's say your rook was on f1. How would you take? So without thinking, right? Because you're opening a file. So generally, when you have moved your rook already, so it makes a lot of sense for black to capture it, because it kind of discourages to take with the pawn, because there's you can't even play rook f1 in one move because there's a knight there. But because the nature of the position is kind of close, there isn't a lot happening, white has the time to rearrange his pieces. So I think taking either way is fine, but he took with the pawn, and I think it's very interesting, because now I can move the knight, put a rook on f1, and I have an open file. Because even on the e file, this rook it's attacking the pawn, but I can defend the pawn quite easily by moving my bishop, so it doesn't seem to have a lot of future. And white's pieces are kind of cramped, so black has a better center, the e5 pawn versus the d3 pawn. And this pawn is a weakness. So yeah, so now you have a lot of plans. You can move your knight, play rook f1, you can play d4, so rook d8. So knight comes out. In here, so he played. So the reason he played so of course knight g3 to activate the knight, control e4. So queen f2, because if you're going to play d4, you need to get out of this file. Queen d6, d6, and b4. So how to continue? So anyone who plays e4, like faces this with black, or if you're an Italian or Roy Lopez player with white, you need really, this move really needs to stand out to you. Well, okay, you have a threat. So rook a1, centralizing move, but something specific. So you could have played rook d1. Like you can always put your rook on d1, but there's something very specific about this b4. So you're attacking this, you're putting pressure on this e5 pawn, right? So what are the defenders? Knight, queen. So if you can somehow put more pressure on the defenders. So I agree, the bishop on c2, of course, nice piece, attacking, but realistically it's not really doing much. Because you're attacking, but everything is defended. If the knight wasn't here, then okay. Right. And again, if you're, and this is a theme in the Roy Lopez, so sometimes you go like a5, a4, a5, you go a4 like before a5 just so you can put a bishop on a4. So now bishop is here, so now we have a threat. So we're threatening this guy. So takes. So how do we take? Yeah, so normally we would take with the c pawns, but here white has a very specific idea, again, involving this guy. So if you're going to take with the knight, you need to have an idea, otherwise why are you weakening your position? So normally we're going to take with either pawn to... so c takes d4 looks very nice because we have an open file, we want to play e4, he takes d4, we're opening up the e file, and we have a pawn chain. So what happens if knight takes? Like why are you doing this? Besides the fact that I'm giving you hints. Yes. Exactly. Again, you're only doing it because you have a specific reason. If you don't have this knight f5 idea, this knight d4 is just a terrible move because you're just weakening your position. So knight d4, bishop d7. So which knight? Yeah, so you can do it too. So he wants to have both knights being able to have access to this f5 square. So again, specific calculation. So knight here. And another reason is if you do it this way, the queen cannot stay on this diagonal to stop queen g3. So the queen is to defend the bishop. So queen went here. So next move should be obvious. Queen g3, threatening mate. And another problem for black is if the pawn is on h6. So both of these pawns are targets. If the pawn was on h7, I would simply just play g6. Maybe still will be under attack, but no, wouldn't be hanging at least, yes. So knight h5. I think the reason he's playing queen g3 is because he wants to provoke g6 and have more weaknesses, so his queen can get in. Because here if you take, let's say, so I have to decide where. So I cannot go here because this hangs. So at least like more or less my position looks kind of together. But if you also put a pawn on g6, then my queen can get into the dark squares. But knight a6 is a good move. So queen g3, knight h5. So we're taking, right? Sorry, so queen g4, now we're taking. So king g7. So what to do? So he decided to bring another piece into the attack. So which piece can join the attack? Rook f1, so now I have a threat, knight h6 and another one. So of course if you're attacking, the more pieces come into the attack, the more powerful your attack is. So black defends. Now white starts to play simple. So black has no threats. So we don't have to be in a rush.
Rook to d1,
Even simpler. There's something under attack. Yeah, just take the pawn. So now you're up 2 pawns. So if your attack doesn't work out, you can win in an endgame with 2 extra pawns. So rook e4. So queen has to go. We have to keep the pin. So check. Knight comes here. So simply defends the pawn. Now the other knight wants to go to f5. This one is hanging. So here, king g8. Yeah, so black just blundered. So I mean, okay, so black player is a grandmaster, but when you're under pressure the whole game, it's especially in a position like this, whenever like all these pieces are coming in, you're just struggling to find moves. Very easy to just collapse and blunder, and this is how blunders happen. Right? I mean, okay, they can happen randomly too, like you just don't see something. But when you're under a lot of pressure the whole game, it's very easy to just give something up and blunder. So yeah, so sorry, I went by too fast. So take, and of course knight f6, just winning a piece. So black resigned, but just to show. So a few interesting things I just want to go over again that I liked in this game. One of the things, ideas that I like is this f takes c3. So again, this kind of goes against the general ideas that we know. Because your rook moved away, it doesn't make sense to do it. And especially you have a rook on e1, so you're closing the file of your rook. But white has a long-term idea, bringing the rook back and playing d4 in the future. And another thing is, and I've talked about this a lot in my lectures in general, you always want to keep an open mind and not be too focused on one side of the game. Because now he played b4, now all of a sudden something happens on this side of the board. So you put a bishop on a4, and now this is a problem, this f5 square is a problem, as we saw. So you always want to make sure you're not too focused on one thing in the game. So you're looking at the board as one. So you always want to keep an eye on everything that's happening. So this part, and the third thing that was interesting, so knight d4, again, kind of an ugly move, creating this weakness, and just kind of counterintuitive of how we learn how we're supposed to capture in this kind of positions, but it's done for a specific reason. So if you have a specific reason for making a weakness and you calculate it's going to work out, then you can go ahead and play it. But if you play knight d4 because you think this is the best way to capture without this tactical calculation, then your intuition is not there, and you need to pay attention to these kind of things. And the rest of the game is just very straightforward. Just winning the pawns, just winning all the pawns. So these are the 2 games that I have for. So we'll see how his career turns out, as he's 10 years old and already in IM.